All right. I'm Bernie Zimmerman. I'm the chair of the Nevada County Historical Landmarks Commission, which was formed by the Board of Supervisors in 1969 to help promote and preserve Nevada County history. And one of the ways we preserve it is we conduct oral history interviews of the people who know about our history or even help make our history. And today I'm going to be interviewing Daryl Sanford. Now, the video will be publicly available. We'll probably post it on our website, maybe on our YouTube channel. It'll always be available through the Searles Historical Library. So, Daryl, let's start with you telling us something about yourself. Where were you born? When were you born? That sort of thing.
I was born in 1955 in September, and in Auburn. I raised here on the ranch my whole life, except for when I, got married and built my own house and did all that. But during the time that I was working in I worked for the fire department for 33 years. When I got out of high school, my father told me that, he goes, well, you got to go out and find a job because the ranch can't hold two families. So, but I expect you home on the weekends.
That sounds a lot like when I was thinking about going to school. My parents said, well, you can go. We lived in New Jersey. You go to Princeton, but you got to be able to come home on the weekends.
Yeah.
And I gather you didn't.
Yeah. I had
Neither
to,
did I. So you've lived most of your life or on this ranch?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us something about the ranch. Maybe you can first tell us something about your family. When did your family arrive in Nevada County?
Well, the first family members came for the gold rush, and there was four brothers, and the oldest ones came in 1848, and then the other two brothers came in, I think, 52 and 55, somewhere around there, 1852 and 55. And there's some discrepancy in the family history book on exactly when, but that was what they had done, how they got here. And then they mainly, the main ranch was in what's now the Spencerville Wildlife Area in Waldo. And, down there, that's where my father was born. In fact, he had showed me one time a little rock wall, and he goes, oh, let's go look at that. So we went down in this field, and we get there, and he goes, yep, this is the house I was born in, in 1926.
Well, let's go back for a moment. So who was the first family member to arrive in Nevada County?
Well, I think it was Nathan Sanford.
Right.
And then behind him was James Monroe, and I think he went by Monroe because his father's name was James. And in Timbuktu, they said he had a mining claim there, and there's a creek called Sanford Creek in Timbuktu.
Okay. Now, so you've thrown a whole bunch of things on the table. Let's first, let me pin down a few more things. Where were the Sanfords from?
They came from Nova Scotia. Originally, you go back 10 generations, and the family started in Denham, England in 1631.
Okay.
Ended up in Portsmouth, Boston area, and then worked their way up and ended up in Nova Scotia, and then they came across from there.
So they came to Nevada County from Nova Scotia.
Yes.
At least.
And
Nathan.
some of them came by wagon, and some of them came by ship.
And do you know why they came here?
The older brothers came for gold. The older two came searching for gold, and then the third brother, Levi, he came out and he got 3 dairy cows, and he started a dairy, and then got Benjamin, who was my direct descendant, to come out and work the dairy with him, and he did a little bit of mining, but they said he didn't like it, and went back to the ranching. and they would take the dairy products and the vegetables that they would grow and stuff, and take it up to Grass Valley and sell it to the miners.
So I think Nathan, you said, settled down in the Spenceville area around Waldo?
Well, they all settled in there, and there's also the ranch in behind us here, the Walter Sanford, which is Paul Sanford Ranch, in behind us off Sanford Road. That one there, and that was a lot of the ranch, plus the ranch here, and.
So let's just focus for Waldo. I've always been curious. Waldo at one point was called Cabbage Patch. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Because apparently during Gold Rush days, several people, I don't think they were miners, they were black, grew cabbages, which they sold to the miners.
Huh.
It was perceived to be good for, scurvy and things like that. It became Waldo around the turn of the century. But it was Cabbage Patch up until I think the 1890s. Well, any event, so back, so you in Spenceville, I imagine that your family must have known the Kneebones, who were pretty prominent in that area.
Yeah, and my great-grandfather married into the Jones family, who was also there. And the Jones family ran goods from Sacramento through the gold country in Grass Valley, Nevada City, and then all the way up to Virginia City.
Did you personally know any of the Kneebones?
No, I did not.
We're trying to landmark the Kneebone family cemetery in Spenceville, and if we can get that accomplished, it's being held up by the Fish and Wildlife people. There may be a giant Kneebone family reunion at that point. We're hoping we can make that happen.
Yeah.
All right, so, and then you said you had another branch of the family that was living over by Timbuktu, which is actually it's across the county line.
Yeah.
And what were they doing there? You said they were mining?
He was mining. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Nathan.
Now, I'm interviewing you here on a ranch on Garden Bar Road in the Wolf area. So when did your family acquire this property?
This particular piece that my house is on was bought in 1887 from the railroad company. The other part of the ranch was bought in 1871 from the railroad company by J.B. Underwood. When he passed away in 03 it was. When he passed away, it went to an auction, and my great-grandfather bought it from the estate.
Underwood's a name that I recognize. Now, you mentioned the railroad. Is there a railroad around here?
No, there is not, but the railroad company owned a lot of land out here. A lot of the parcels out here were originally, and when they decided a town wouldn't go into an area, they would sell those. So back in the 1870s and 80s, when they determined, well, there's no railroad going through this country, and they would sell the land that they
Now,
owned.
is this the railroad that was supposed to come out from Marysville and go through Nevada City, Grass Valley, Nevada City? I know at one point it was actually going to start in Sacramento, and they were going to run a railroad up this way. Do you know, is that what you're talking about, or
No,
later became the
I think
Transcontinental?
I think I have the one of the deeds to where we could find out which railroad company it was.
Okay, that might be interesting. Okay, so here we are on the ranch. So tell us something about the ranch. What do you raise here or grow here?
Beef cattle, and so we have beef cows, and we put up our own crop of hay to make it so that we can afford to have cattle. Right now, cattle are becoming a expensive hobby.
So you got to be able to feed them.
Yeah.
And you can't afford store prices,
No.
I'm guessing. Okay. How many head of cattle do you have?
Right now, because of the drought and everything, I'm way down. I've only got about 40 head.
Now, was there a time when you, or probably would have been one of your ancestors, would have driven your cattle up into the high country during the
Yes.
summer?
My great-grandfather, he owned a total of 7,500 head of cattle at one time and 2,500 head of sheep. He owned, I think, 4,200 acres himself, from Spenceville all the way over to here. And he leased all of his in-laws, which was the Jones family, which were also over there in the Spenceville area. and he leased their land, and where Bucks Lake is today was the Bucks Ranch, and he bought that. Mr. Jones, great grandpa Jones bought the Bucks Ranch, and he had like there's a hotel, a tack and feed, and all that other there. But they would take Paul, cousin that was on another part of the ranch. He told a story before he passed away that was it was really neat to hear him tell it, because he said he was just about 15, 16 years old. They were taking cattle from the Spenceville Ranch up to the Bucks Ranch. And an old timer came up to him, and he goes, "Paul, you look around. You're never going to see this many cows in one bunch." And while he told the story and was explaining it to us, he closed his eyes as he was telling it, and you just basically, you felt like you were there with him, because he said they had 1,000 head of cattle. And they were strung out over past what would now be, where Lake Orville is, going up in the hills towards there. And he said he when the old timer told him that, he said he looked ahead of him and he could see the dust coming up off the hooves of the cows, and he looked behind him, he could, as far as he could see in that direction, were cows. But when he told the story, you felt like you were there with him because of the way he told it and the detail he put into it. It was just so neat to hear.
Well, I can sort of imagine that just as I'm sitting here listening to you. Yeah. I don't imagine you'd see that many cattle anywhere around here at this time of the...
No, he said that was the last time they did it, because they ended up, a couple of bigwigs from PG&E came up and made him an offer on the property, and so that he sold it, and lo and behold, a year or so later, they put in the reservoir.
Okay. Now, were you ever personally involved in those cattle drives?
No, I remember, after where the main ranch was in Spenceville, when that was eminent domain away, they kept the grazing rights for years and years. And I remember going out when I was little, helping on the horseback with my dad, bringing them back the last leg of the trip from Spenceville over to here. But they used to run 125 head of mother cows here on this place, and they would go over there and pasture them and then bring them back to here.
Let's go back and talk a little bit more about yourself. So first, before we get to the fire department, where'd you go to school?
I went to school at, grammar school I went Pleasant Ridge, and then I went to Nevada Union and graduated in 73.
So was Pleasant Ridge a one-room schoolhouse at that time?
It had 8 rooms when I...
Oh, you're up to 8.
Yeah.
We landmarked the Lime Kiln School.
Yeah.
And that was a one-room schoolhouse. I think
there was a Wolf School.
And there was a Wolf School, yeah.
Wolf School is where everybody went to. My older sisters went to the Wolf Schoolhouse, which is right there on Garden Bar Road, just after you go down just a little ways.
So I'm trying to picture this in relation to the corner of Wolf and Garden Bar. That would be the Sweet Ranch, and then you continue down Garden Bar. Is it around where the curve is?
Yeah, where those ponds are right there on the hillside opposite.
And that's where the schoolhouse was?
Yeah.
Anything left of that now?
No. I remember it being there when I was young, and I'll look and see if I can find a picture of it.
Yeah, that actually would be kind of neat. We can incorporate some pictures either into it or attach them to the end of it.
Yeah.
Anything about your school experience that stands up to you? You remember any adventures? Did you ride your horse to school like Felicia did?
No, when I was going to school and everything, even before I got my license and stuff, I would, because the school wouldn't, for the high school, they would only pick us up at Wolf Road. So I would take the car and I'd drive it up there, pull it off the side of the road, get on the bus, and when end of the day I'd come back, get in the car, and drive back down the road.
That's probably not as much fun as a horse. So what drew you into the fire department?
Well, it was one of those things where I had really not planned on joining the fire department, and at the time I got out of high school, I was trying to figure out what to do, and a buddy of mine goes, "Hey, the Forest Service is accepting applications," and I'm going, "I don't want to work I don't want to do that. And so he kept after me, and finally I said, okay, I'll go with you, and fill out an application. We filled out an application. I get home, the neighbor, Gary Sweet, was a captain at Higgins Cal Fire Station there. And he had heard, my dad had told him that what I'd done. He goes, well, why don't you tell me? He goes, I could have got you on with us months ago. He goes, anyway, fill out this application. You start tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. You don't interview, nothing. Because back then, nobody wanted the job because it was 5 24-hour days. And you got paid $494 a month, and they took meals out.
And this was at the Higgins.
At Higgins, yeah.
Okay.
And I worked there for four summers. Then I went to San Mateo County Fire, which was part of, which was a contract county. And then I worked my last 20 years in Butte County Fire and retired out of there as a captain.
Okay, so you've actually spent quite a bit of time away from the ranch, I guess.
Well, what I would do is I would go and work my shifts, and then I would come home.
Oh.
And everything. So I lived in Lake of the Pines while commuting to down there and everything. And then I finally, in the 80s, I built this house here myself.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Boy, well, you had another career.
Yeah.
You could have been a contractor. Now, Felicia Tracy was the one who suggested you for an interview. How long have you known Felicia?
For a lot of years, but I'm not exactly sure how many years it's been, but she's been around for a long time.
She's been around since
also.
the 40s, that she tells me.
Yeah.
And you must have also known Dick.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are you part of that horse riding crowd?
No. I always, when I was a kid growing up, riding a horse meant you were working, so I just didn't have that interest that everybody else did.
So Felicia told me about this issue that you had raised before we got started, which was the Park Service needing people to help them determine where the proposed parks and national forests would go. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, what I was told was that my grandfather had taken, and they would come to the ranchers who were up in those areas up there where the Tahoe National Forest is now, and they would ask the ranchers, because they knew the countryside really well, and they'd say, hey, will you take some people up there on a camping excursion and do that? And I think they compensate them somehow or whatever. So they determined that those were basically like their first park rangers, is the way it was termed to me by my uncle, the way it was explained to him. So they named the lakes after the Sanford and Maloney family, because there's a couple of natural lakes up there between Highway 20 and Interstate 80 up in the mountains there. And in fact, if you Google it, you can find Sanford Lake on there.
I've seen some of the lakes. I don't know that I've ever associated that name with one of them, but I'll figure it out as soon as we leave here. Yeah. Now, how do the Loneys relate to the Sanfords?
The Loney, they came when my great-grandfather, Benjamin Sanford, when he came out, he came out by himself, and then his wife came out later, and she came out with Mr. Loney and on the ship, and she got really seasick, and she had a little girl, so he took care of her, and he always said, that was his girl, because he just, and so the families became really close, and then he worked, if I'm not mistaken, for Levi Sanford, the older brother.
Okay.
Yeah, and they had the dairy, because Levi started a dairy, and then he took him on as a partner. I'm pretty sure that's the way it was read to me.
Which dairy?
He had his own dairy.
Oh. Out
there in Spencerville. He started off with 3 cows. I don't know what he ended up with, but when he came out, that was his intent, was to start a dairy and sell to the miners. So Benjamin would take the dairy products and everything up to the miners in Grass Valley, Nevada City.
Did he have a brand that we would recognize?
No, it was just, you know, in
Sanford
those days,
area.
yeah, they would just sell it direct to people.
Now, there's a Loney Sanford Cemetery not too far from here. Well,
Yeah,
actually, this is a
it's-
little further.
it's Mc-
It's up
it's
McCourtney
McCourtney
Road,
Road, yeah.
just about a half a mile or so
Yeah.
past the intersection
Yeah.
with Lime Kiln.
So that
What's
was-
that all about?
That was actually the Sanford Cemetery, and when my grandmother gave it over to the county renamed it and everything because it was on the Loney Ranch.
Ah,
But my great grandfather bought that from the Loney family to put in a church and cemetery. And all the churches, you know, and Levi Sanford started several churches. They said he started one at Pleasant Ridge, one in Grass Valley, and one in Sacramento, that he had started all these different churches. But they were gonna put the one there on McCourtney Road, and everybody kind of went to Grass Valley, so they abandoned that and just used it as a family cemetery.
so there are a lot of Loneys and Sanfords that be buried in that
Yes,
cemetery.
there are, yeah.
Now, it's now operated by the Nevada Cemetery District.
Yes.
Of which I'm a trustee, and it's open to the public. I mean,
yeah.
it's an open, you know, anybody who qualifies can get buried there. Before we end this thing, I'm just sort of curious for what your and all the many things you've done and all the years you've kind of lived here. Do you have any thoughts about how Nevada County has changed and this general area in particular?
Well, I do know that my grandfather always said that when you can see your neighbors, it's time to move. And he had moved a long time ago.
Yeah.
I know that my uncle had the ranch below us, and, you know, Ernie Struckman, and he had 2,500 acres, you know, and it was just what's attached to us and down below. And my one aunt and him got married and everything. And in '69, he said, California taxes are too high. I'm moving to Arkansas.
Oh.
And he told my cousins, you know, he called them in for a meeting, is what they told me, and he said, they go, yeah, what? And he goes, you want your inheritance? And they both said, yeah, we want our inheritance. He goes, then follow me, it's going to Arkansas. And he sold the place and bought 2,800 acres in farmland in Arkansas.
Had he been to Arkansas before he did that?
He went on a Farm Bureau tour, and that's where he decided he was going to go.
Oh, okay. I've been to Arkansas once or twice. I think I prefer California myself.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything that you're dying to talk about or to tell me, but I just haven't asked you the right question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I know that there's a lot of history here that went on, you know, and I know that, you know, up in the hills, up in back here, there was a spot that my grandfather had a still during the Prohibition.
You can talk about that now.
Now you
Statute
can.
of limitations is
It's
run.
kind of gone by.
Yeah.
And one of the neighbors that had bought that property, I was talking to him one day, and I said, well, you know where your pond is? I go, that's where Grandpa had a still. And he goes, that's what that was. And I go, what? And he goes, we found this big copper cylinder in the, you know, buried in the mud out there.
What was he distilling? Do you know?
I think whiskey. I know he also had 2.5 acres of grapes right next to the ranch house down here.
Little brandy.
So he had a little I think each, probably. And
Yeah.
and then he, you know, I was told by Don Sweet, he said that Grandpa used to have an old Model T truck, and he had a little stock trailer on the back of it, you know, basically a little, you know, on the back of the pickup there. And he had some pigs in there, and he would drive around delivering the moonshine to the different places with the pigs in back, and if anybody stopped him, he'd say, oh, I'm taking these up to...
Okay, and I imagine it worked too.
Yeah.
Pretty clever.
Yeah.
Pretty clever. Speaking of the Sweets, did you ever know John Sweet, the postmaster at Wolf, or is that before your time?
That's kind of, I was really young when, yeah.
Okay, well, in that case, I think we'll just
then-
sort of,
Yeah, because
unless you got something you want to add.
No, I was just going to say that one of their uncles was married to my grandmother's sister. So John Wool and Madge, Madge was my grandmother's sister and everything. And then my mom was a butler, so the Butler branches were all related. So at one time, the whole lower end of the county was related.
Well,
blacks,
it's still got a lot of community feel to it.
Yeah,
You know, I run into some of the same families, and that sort of thing. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap this up. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to bring this to an end.